Tonight on Hitasa, we look into the prolific works of fine artist Marvin Abwao, as well as insights on the naming culture in Kenya.
Naming has always been spiritual and destiny-based.
Art has been an integral part of mankind's life since forever. As time goes by, the art terms become more complex, and today there is nothing more expressive than fine art. Fine art was extremely popular in the 19th century, as at the time, most artists emphasized more in utilizing art as a freedom of expression. One of the most influential fine artists is the leading figure of Cubism, Pablo Picasso. Not only that, he also led numerous artistic movements such as Surrealism, Expressionism, and many more. Today, we link up with Marvin Abwao, a fine artist extraordinaire showing prowess in digital illustration, carving, and drawing.
My kind of work is majorly focused on like Afrofuturism. That's a term by the BSQ. So basically it's what's kind in Africa. It still has elements of the tradition in it, but you can tell these are modern day people and modern day problems or like marketplaces. I like people attending events and the way they are dressed. So if you take a close look, it'll have elements of clothing that are now in trends, and some of my work involves it's called wicker work or basketry. I like the way they look. I like basketry. So all in all, you can say mostly day-to-day scenes, people, and just the environment in general.
Though not so drawn to the finer details of art at an early age, Marvin's desire to be an artist would grow on him as he got older.
When I was growing up, my mom used to take me for, I don't know if it's still there, but we used to go for something called the art fair, or it used to be held at the museum. Ironically, I never used to paint. I was that kid who would wait for the instructor to build his model, then I'd take the instructor's because his looked better than mine. Why would I like struggle? So it started there. Yeah, then I used to draw like as a kid. Then in high school, like I properly started studying art. It was the first time I studied art it's called art and design, I believe. Yeah. So high school, I developed the passion. I saw it was something worthwhile, and I had like I had the passion for it and the talent for it. So I continued. After high school is when now I joined the Buruburu Institute of Fine Art.
It is at the Buruburu Institute of Fine Arts that his love for art would solidify, as he identified a unique way to express himself on canvas.
It's a bit of expressionism meets realism, yeah. But the newspaper now came to be after. When I was in BIFA, there's a lecturer named Mr. Nkubi. He gave us like it was an assignment to draw on newspaper. When I did it, at first I was complaining. I'm like, why? Then I looked at the outcome. I'm like, hey, this could actually work. Then when my results or like the artwork was getting evaluated, we had a guest lecturer who was evaluating and told me, you know what, you should stick to this style. It suits you and you'll never run out of newspapers, because after people read the news, what happens to the newspapers? Majority of people want to be able to tell you it's either the butchery or Lord knows where, but they just throw them away. So yeah.
Now we get into Marvin's creative space as he lets us in on the process that goes into the coming up of his pieces of art. We start off with stretching the canvas.
So stretching involves just pulling the canvas on top of the stretcher and making sure it's tight enough. It needs some bit of ugali. So most artists make the stretchers by themselves before they start this process, because it's a way of being much more accurate when you measured everything by yourself. So when you get there, you're not like, didn't I want like a square? Then it's not. So
after stretching, we get into priming the canvas.
Priming is like preparing your canvas. So it's preparing it to handle the paint that's to come on top, or whatever you're going to put on top, because some people don't paint.
After priming, Marvin now uses wood glue to stick the newspapers onto the canvas, which eventually he will paint on.
Wood glue adheres very well when it comes to like adhering, and it turns clear. So you won't be there unashindwa, is this glue? No. It turns clear, A. B, most people forget that paper was once wood, so its best friend is wood glue.
Yeah.
I don't like pictures like from newspapers, just like the tiny words. So I avoid those. I just like the random text and random stories. I want people to read random stories, because even when you're reading the newspaper, you're most likely reading just the particulars that you want. Yeah. But if it's a random story and you're looking for an artwork, you're like, I didn't know this. So when I'm arranging my newspapers, it depends on what type of painting I'm making. Am I making a landscape? Or am I making a portrait? Now, depending on which one it is, they'll face that direction. If it's a landscape, I like my words to be upright.
Once he is done sticking the newspapers, Marvin moves on to sketching.
I water down my acrylics so they behave like watercolor, so that it's translucent enough you can see the newspaper. Otherwise, we would have wasted a lot of time pasting the newspapers that we're going to cover.
Marvin, just like Solomon, the charcoal artist we featured on our previous episode, was also mentored by renowned artist Patrick Mukabi.
Solomon told me there's a cool guy named Patrick Mukabi. I'm like, the Patrick Mukabi we learn about, like the famous one? I could like, yeah. Then I went to, back then there were the Railways Museum. So we went, I met the guy. So we just vibed like from the get-go. He was like, okay, I see what you can do. Now you need, as an artist, he took me from being constricted in the educational sector, like assignment wise, to now being free, element driven, like to draw any subject I want freely without any constriction.
As the art piece continues to take shape, Marvin lets us in on his transition to exhibiting his work and the reception thus far.
I was part of a group known as Fanisi Arts. So I did a couple of group exhibitions with them. After that, and I did I participated in shows, and the response I got from like buyers and people buying artworks was good. So if that's the kind of response you get from you expressing yourself on a canvas, yeah, it shows that it's a career-worthy path.
The art piece is left to dry for a few minutes, after which Marvin now continues to add the finer details, giving life to the piece. One of our key questions on the program that will keep recurring is trying to find out the place for growth in Kenya's art industry and how sustainable is it for artists.
We don't sell pieces every day, let's not lie. And even if you have an exhibition, you'll have to like do a collective number of pieces for that exhibition, let's say around 20 pieces. Now those 20 pieces are going to take time, months, if not a year or two. Now you've been preparing for this exhibition, right? But at the end of the day, out of the 20 pieces, maybe 5 sell, okay? Remember, you were working for the past year, you haven't sold anything, so how are you going to make rent? So we're not there whereby we are trying. I know artists who are signed by galleries such that the gallery gives you an allowance. They pay for your rent and monthly income, having expected there's a certain amount you'll make at the end of the year. So they'll take back the money that they've been giving you to sustain yourself. Then the remainder is what you're given, yeah, in excess.
As the art piece comes to life, we leave you with Marvin's reflections on his journey so far and some of the critical lessons learned.
Always save up. I didn't save when I was young. I was just getting money. It was hand to mouth. So I just need to think about, hey, you gotta save up for the future. There's a certain time you're gonna need money, eh? Then there's this mistake that we make as an artist. We tend to like judge ourselves a bit too harshly. As in, it's never too early to start exhibiting. That artwork that you feel like is not good enough might be good enough. You need to take it, let the people see what you're capable of. So even as an artist, if someone started following you back, then they can see how far you've grown as you go by. So I should have done that.
Here's a look at what's coming up after the break.
Naming has never been aesthetic.
Funny enough, my dad was very conventional, so he gave us only one name.
This Friday on Behind the Scenes. The more you give, the more you help preach the gospel, the more you reach other people, the more you give them a chance to get transformed as you were transformed by the same station.
I'm also happy to see that this station is carried by Christians.
Yes, family brought a new concept of what it means to read your Bible and pray every day. You could have church every day, which is something we only experienced maybe once a week.
That's on Behind the Scenes this Friday at 8:30 p.m.
Kenya, a country with many ethnicities that have continued to define our ways of life from the ancestral age to date. Naming is a crucial part of culture in Kenya, as it has been used to continue lineages in reference to family, tradition, and with the coming of missionaries, many started to adopt Christian names as well. It is clear today that naming has evolved, and to get a better understanding, we start by engaging Reverend Tom Otieno as he starts off with reflections on the meaning of his names.
I was actually named after a politician, Tom Mboya, and basically I then had to dig into his life and then also dig into the names Thomas Joseph Mboya. And Otieno basically is the time I was born, time of the day. I needed to dig into why my people name like that. Why the Luos name like that is because the worship of the god of the Luos is the worship of the sun mostly. I also looked at the meanings of the names, Thomas and then Joseph, and then Mboya could be anything between Kamba and Luo because he was born in Kambaland. Mboya is prayer.
Finding meaning and being intentional about names was something the Reverend and his wife had in mind as they named their children.
I named them what God impressed upon my heart to name them according to what God wanted them to become. Shekinah is to become a worshiper and a preacher. And for everything else she does, whether she's going to be a medical doctor or whether she's going to be an artist or a theater person or whatever other aspirations she has, she cannot miss the ministry and she cannot miss the worship, right? Because those are the callings upon her life. Shama is primarily a preacher, so she's called Jayalo, which is her second name. And so she's articulate, she's brilliant, and she is set to become an artist, but she also has the music in her and the preaching in her. So they all have a holy calling. So is Dawood Yada Gweth. Dawood Yada is praise. Dawood is beloved of God, and Gweth is the blessing. So he also has a prophetic mantle on him. He has a worship mantle on him. But he also is very creative and is very articulate. Shalom. Muhoeri is an intercessor. That's his name, Muhoeri. Shalom is complete. People think shalom means peace, but it means complete. And from that completeness comes all aspects of life, including peace. And Shalom he is complete in many ways. He has a lot of gifts in him. He is a consummate musician and worshiper. He's also a preacher. He's a leader. They're all leaders in their own right, these children. So our naming was basically prophetic.
We also engage Naomi Moita, a mother of three who works as a business operations specialist in strategy and finance.
My name as per growing up was Njoki Moita. Njoki is my grandmother's name, okay, so who happens to be the mother to my father, all right? And then funny enough, my dad was very conventional, So he gave us only one name. I only had one name. And he added another name called Otugi. Otugi is grace in English. And then when I go to school, there's always the 3 names convention: first name, second name, third name. So we got into that. Of course, I think I went to school, I only had 2 names, Njoki, Moita. The way you write your nickname, so I'd put Grace, because I want to feel in the mix as other children. Why don't I have an English name? So when I was in high school, I had a conversation with my dad, and he's like, if you want to look for a name, you want an English name, look for a name. So actually, the name Naomi, I gave myself, and I got the name when I was in Form 4.
For Naomi and her husband, being in a cross-cultural marriage would prove challenging from the onset of naming their first child, as the king was keen on maintaining tradition.
Funny enough, when I gave and we had agreed we'll name after my mother. We're in a tribal marriage, but since I liked my mother's name, so I'd requested my husband to allow me, and he didn't have an issue with that. But when the baby came and was received, some elders advised it will bring conflict with the in-laws, so steer away. In 2 or 3 days, we looked for a name. We called her Michelle because like God, and also that was the time Barack Obama was vying for president. So it was, it was a good thing to see a strong woman in the face of international politics. She would not have been running. She was not running for presidency, but she was very active in the presidential campaigns. Yes, so that's why we got the name Michelle. And to shorten it, we called her, instead of Precious, I called her Preshi. So her name is Preshi Michelle Okello.
As the Lord blessed them with 2 more children, they became more intentional and sought profound meaning in their respective names.
Our second born, she's called Tasha Okello. So I've explained, so we have moved on and we're okay with not having customary names. So we named her, we're expecting her in January. So Talisa is one of noble birth. Tasha is short form for Natasha, born during December Christmas period. Yes, so hence her name. For the boy, that one is a bit thought of, because one, he's a man, so the man carries the surname of his family. If he ever grows up and gets a family, then we still have to think African. So we looked for an African name that does not resemble, it does not point out to the tribal name. So it's called Hawi. Hawi means blessed.
As Naomi reflects the names and how their children have turned out to be, there is a correlation as to whom they hoped they'd become.
For Michelle, she's very courageous. She's a confident woman. You see, she's musically talented. When she's leading music now, she's in the worship team. We see like God. I can actually honestly see it. All right. And even for the little one, he's just 3 years. I've seen what a blessed child is. He's been through health issues the last 2 years. We've gone through back through it all. But he's growing up well. He's just blessed. The favor of God is on him. I can see that. Yeah. And the dad called him Alvin. Alvin is my friend. So the dad believes they'll be friends as he grows. And he has faith in that completely, that as he grows, he'll be my friend, so my wife's friend.
In every society, naming is an effective form of identity and it gives a sense of belonging. Traditionally, being named after people was supposed to have a bearing on how one would turn out to be, and for Naomi's family, they chose not to continue a name.
So my dad was, and this we're talking about in the 80s, for him to declare, and especially for him to declare against his relatives that he will not name after people. His father was called Kenywa. Kenywa means a drunkard. So he declared nobody is going. When it went to his son, he said, I'm not going to name. Because that is the requirement, you name after your father. And so the backlash had already started. And people would come, like relatives come, they insist on the name. But I have seen the differentiation, and especially now for us who are grown-up children. And if my dad talks, he'll say, I knew what I was doing. Following, you are actually naming and putting a mark. It's like you're declaring, it's a prophecy on that child. What do you want them to be? What character do you want them to form? What is the path?
With the latest trends of modernity and the different influences in our society today, naming based on culture is slowly losing its footing.
Cultural naming basically depends on what culture one comes from, but today you know that this generation is not as steeped in culture as it was. So we have our own culture, especially those who are in town, they have their own culture. Even those who are living in the village are not as steeped as they used to be. You know, the effects of modernity have washed away some of those things. So we are having people in the deep village getting their names off of television programs. And we need to go back to what God designed, His divine design. His divine design was that every one of us, and still is, that every one of us has a divine purpose. There's a why we are here. And that why constitutes a major part of what you should be called in terms of your name. You shall call, Matthew 1 verse 21, you shall call his name Jesus because he will save his people from sin. Yahshua, Yah, God, Shua, Yahshua is God, is salvation.
Therefore, it is important to have this in mind as we name our children in our world filled with all these influences.
The more that your name is called, the more certain transactions happen in the spiritual realm. Because calling a person is verbalizing an intention over that person's life. So if someone is called blessed, every time you call them blessed, you're activating blessing, their direction. I want to say this, naming has always been spiritual and destiny-based. It doesn't serve any other purpose.
That's it for tonight's show. Remember, you can share your thoughts, questions, and comments to the SMS line 20316 or WhatsApp on 0786 316 316. Also, you can now stream your favorite programs on the go on our YouTube page, Family Media. As you enjoy, remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell for a first-hand glimpse on the latest updates. Next time on Hitasa.
I use old newspaper, collages and bring them together and, with my acrylic paints and try and create, portraits.
Capturing moments and memories become an integral part of humanity almost. So it's literally the one thing that people are doing consistently on a daily life.